Welcome to ACD Combatives. This is Coach Kurt. Today we are going to talk about the ultimate martial art. You heard it right. We're going to talk about the one martial art that rules them all. And of course I say that tongue-in-cheek because if you watch my channel, you know I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that there is one magic bullet for all situations. I pick and choose and rob and steal from other arts. If I like something, I incorporate it. If you're like me, you train martial arts very specifically for self-defense. Of course, at this point in my life, I'm 54, I'm a year from retirement. If you watch my channel, you know I'm a law enforcement officer, 29 years. And for at least 13 years, the last 13 years, I've been a control tactics instructor, use of force instructor, taser, baton, pepper spray, yada, yada. And so for me, martial arts training has to be very practical for what I do. There's some cross relation to self-defense. Of course, law enforcement combatives and control tactics is very similar to self-defense needs, but it has its own differences as well. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Let's talk about not so much of the art that is the ultimate, but what I personally feel. And remember, I'm just some dude on the internet. Take it for what it's worth. Don't get all upset and crazy in the comments, because every once in a while, especially like when I talk about Aikido, I'll get a very long, contrived, usually very well spoken and very well laid out why Aikido is awesome. But again, I digress. So let's talk about what I think the ultimate martial art, or let's just say the ultimate martial art practice, includes. We're going to talk about martial arts such as Sambo. We're going to talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or what I would say Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We're going to talk about combat Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. And when I say combat Jiu-Jitsu, there's various organizations. There's a sport Jiu-Jitsu, mostly out of Europe, but they're definitely in America as well. Just the way they train, very eclectic, ground fighting, throws, takedowns, projections, punching and kicking like you'd see at a karate tournament. But it's more sport oriented. So there's a higher set of rules, and then there's a more combative version. And you'll see on the screen me putting the names of these organizations and so forth. The more combative is basically going to be much closer to like MMA, but in a gi. And then it would be stupid not to mention Kudo. I think that is an amazing system in martial art that comes pretty close to covering all your needs. Again, all these are talked about in the sport context. And anytime you add rules to a situation, that changes how the outcome is going to happen when you're talking sports. Self-defense, of course, there are no rules, but I hate it when people say, well, we don't do that because we can't do that safely. You know how I feel about that if you've watched any of my videos. Meaning, unless you live in the zombie apocalypse aftermath, there are definitely rules in any civilized society, unless you want to go to prison. But listen, I'm looking at these specific four organizations / martial arts, Kudo, the sport Jiu-Jitsu, the more combat Sambo, and the combat Jiu-Jitsu International Federation. I'm looking at these as generically speaking. I'm not saying that they're not other organizations, other martial arts that basically are very similar in nature. This video would go on way too long if I tried to hunt and fish and find every martial art and every organization that uses this. But basically, I'm looking at sport martial arts in that pressure test in a combative way. Now, we all know that self-defense, there are weapons, awareness of your surroundings, blah, blah, blah. We all know all that. I'm not suggesting that's not equally important. The reason I'm looking at these particular martial arts is because I think they are super strong examples of what we're talking about. If you train your martial art in these ranges, like using Kaji Kembo as an example, multiple ranges. Again, I don't care what system or style you train, as long as you're incorporating takedowns and throws, as long as you're incorporating holds and pins, as long as you're incorporating some ground fighting, at least being good enough on the ground that you can get back up if you have to or when you can. We all know that if the ground game is going to happen to you, it's going to happen to you. Sometimes you just can't help but go to the ground, regardless of the situation. And of course, we'll beat the dead horse. You don't want to go to the ground necessarily in a street fight. We've heard the millions of examples of the buddy walking up and kicking you in the head. All very true, absolutely. Doesn't change the fact that you need to have some decent intermediate level skills, at least a strong blue belt level. And I say blue belt as in like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a good measuring tool of grappling skills. A strong blue belt level of Jiu-Jitsu on the ground is important. Listen, in self-defense, you also, again, want to be aware of everything, the whole 9 yards, how to avoid situations, de-escalation, yada, yada, yada. That's not what this is about. Clearly, you should be incorporating, excuse me, that kind of mindset and training into your martial arts. But we're talking about the kind of martial art or kind of martial arts organizations and systems that are extremely well-rounded, that make it easier for you to translate it to self-defense. Systems like Kudo and the sport Jujitsu and the combat Sambo make it very, very easy to transition to self-defense oriented tactics and techniques and so forth. That is what I'm talking about. That is what I'm pushing here. You'll notice all the examples I've shown are with a gi. Clearly, I'm a big fan of 50-50 training, but that's why I specifically left MMA out. Clearly, MMA is a terrific way to train, but I am a big fan of donning the gi at least 50% of the time. I tend to also focus on much more gi training during the fall and winter, because clearly that's what we're going to be wearing out there in the real world versus summertime when everyone's wearing shorts and T-shirts. I tend to mostly train no-gi. You do whatever works best for you. That's just how I like it. Again, I'm just some dude on the internet. If you listen to my channel, then you're clearly interested in my opinion. If you just stumbled across this, you do whatever works best for you. That's the whole point of training martial arts. It should be something that's your choice, your avenue, your path. Don't let somebody else tell you what you have to do or should do. Now, remember, training sport is a great way of having that resistance, that energy against a resisting opponent. But also remember that drilling and practicing your self-defense techniques separate is also very important. If you go too down the rabbit hole of just doing, like, let's say, MMA style sparring, then you start getting yourself into sets and patterns that eliminate some of your possibilities and practices. So a good balance. I'm just saying that systems like Kudo and the sport Jiu-Jitsu, the combat Jiu-Jitsu, and Sambo are just good examples. You know, the Sambo has gi, Sambo has no gi, Sambo has combat Sambo, Sambo has, sport grappling. So you can incorporate it all into your world just like they do. Again, there are many systems and methods out there. I'm sorry if I didn't bring up a system that you think is important. Again, I used some generic examples that I think shine. Clearly, they all incorporate striking too. That's something I haven't even mentioned yet in this, but by the examples on the screen, you clearly see striking. You have to be able to flow between the striking and the clinch work to the throws and the takedowns. And if you end up on the ground, either by choice or by accident, and those accidents happen in the real world, I assure you, you don't always get to choose to not go to the ground. And sometimes it is tactically intelligent to go to the ground. But you make those decisions, and you can't make those decisions unless you train all the ranges in a acceptable, intelligent way. I mean, not just drilling and even kata, but I'm a big fan of the concept of two-man kata, which is basically just drilling. But you're incorporating all this into your training, and then you have quality resistive training. I tend to do a lot of positional rolling or positional randori, where you set in a position and then go from there. I don't, as I'm getting older and broken down, I don't go full out hardcore rolling anymore. It's been a while since I have. I usually just do positional rolls at this point. I'm also a big fan of the concept of building up to sparring. You see that, for example, in Gracie Combatives, Gracie University. They drill and then they do what they call reflex development drills, which is kind of like a choreographed resistance and you build up to actual sparring or rolling or randori, however you want to use terminology. That's up to you. But you should actually take your time to build up to it. If people spar too soon, people get hurt. You might start developing bad habits. But you should absolutely, when the time is right, and I would say at least 6 months, and then you start sparring, you should definitely start incorporating that into your game. All right, guys, everybody take care. Stay safe. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, and share, and let's be careful out there.
Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out.